What I really highly recommend is don't come here, first of all, don't come here fishing. Don't come here trying to show off anything. These people really hate. I'm talking about Poland. I've never been to Ukraine and I've never been to Belarus. You know what I mean? I'm talking about Poland. They really don't like the show-offy thing. Yes, there's a part of the population here in Poland, they're called Warszawka. It's like this Instagram model type from very, very done up, very, you know, they have the watches and some of the guys have the cars and all that. But this is a part of the society. This is not majority. At the same time, we do have a reputation, for example, for being, womanizers. We have a reputation for lying a little bit. Maybe not as much as other nationalities. You hear there, someone's like, no, from this country, don't ever. But if you hear a Latino and you're courting a lady from whatever country in a developed country, you will very often find at least one friend that will try to warn her. He's a Latino, be careful.
Привit, cześć, hola, and greetings from Odessa Mama on the shores of Black Sea, and welcome back to another episode of the Vodka Vodkast here on the New Europe Experience. Today, I'm interviewing a very special guest. He's also a YouTuber. He's quite renowned in the country that he's promoting, that is Poland. This is JT from the channel Vigo's Dad. JT is originally from the Dominican Republic, and he has been living and showing what life is really like in Poland. It's a country, obviously, that's neighboring here in Ukraine that I cover quite extensively on this channel. So I'm super pumped to have JT here. We're doing this particular episode remotely. I'm not currently in Poland. We have met up in person. There's going to be another video in which JT will give his input on life in Warsaw. So, JT, bienvenido. I'm going to throw out a few words of Spanish as well. How are you today?
Thank you, gracias. I'm really good, Conor. Thank you for having me. I would say once again, because like you said, we already met, but you haven't released that video yet. So thank you for having me for the first time on your channel.
Exactly. This is going to be your published debut, even though we have obviously recorded together in better weather. I'm actually here in Odessa. I thought it'd be sunny, and then the rain came down a little bit, but I think we're going to be all good. So you have been living for how long in Poland? Maybe we can go into a little bit of the backstory about what led you, because you're originally from the Dominican Republic, and what was the route by which you suddenly ended up in Poland first, before we get on to your journey with YouTube and, you know, the advice that you've been giving people who are interested in Poland. Poland has been trending very heavily as a location in this broader new Europe for, I'd say it's like the leading star on YouTube for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's crazy, to be honest. Well, to answer your question, I've been living in Poland permanently, right? Ever since I can tell you that I have a residence here with an address. It's closer to 3 years now, rounding up to 3 years. But, we used to live in other places, in Vienna, in London, and we used to travel so often to Poland that I have always felt like I have lived in the country before. But to be fair, you need to be in a place permanently and deal with post office people and all that stuff to really get the full-on experience. So 3 years, let's say.
So about 3 years you've been living in Poland. How did it all start? I mean, you're from the Dominican Republic. What is the nexus that led you to end up in Poland? I mean, it's not even today, it's not such a common pathway to arriving in the region.
Well, my wife is Polish, so that's the main one. How could a Latino end up in Poland? Funnily enough, I've met a couple of Latinos that ended up here just by studies and work-related things, but most of us are here because of the ladies. I mean, or some sort of connection through a Polish lady.
And did you meet your wife when you were visiting Poland, or did you meet her somewhere else, and then later on you relocated to Warsaw?
No, we met in Spain a long time ago, briefly for a couple of days. To be honest, I met her on the streets of Madrid. I was finishing a master's degree, and she was there for a month doing like a Spanish course, an intensive Spanish course. And yeah, we met on the streets like that. I was waiting for my friend. I saw her with her friend. I was not really trying to pick her up. She was being pursued by a guy selling some CDs, but from my vantage point, it looked like he was bothering them to some degree, or he was doing something that they were not happy with. So I kind of like approached to pretend that I was their friend, like I was with them, you know. So and yeah, they were very sassy, very fast, and we kind of like hit it off. We met the next day, but again, I flew back to my country the third day after I met them, so I didn't have any chance to connect. But we stayed in contact. In those times, I'm talking 2005, you are old enough like me to remember that in those times there was no
that's 20
Facebook
years
still.
ago.
There was no Facebook back then. Facebook started in
Wow.
2006. But back then, you remember Microsoft Messenger, don't you?
Yes, I have memories. I guess I was just finished. I was just finished graduate school. It was 2005. Yeah, we didn't have Facebook until a little bit later.
Exactly. So it was just Messenger. Now we think of Messenger like Facebook, but it was just Messenger. And I added her, and when Facebook came out, it would just add all your friends from Messenger, from Microsoft Messenger, as like friends on Facebook. And somehow for 7 years after that, we stayed in each other's vicinity, I guess, seeing each other's pictures on Facebook. I went on to have a long relationship, and she did also, but in 2011, we found ourselves single again, and I started talking to her. I liked her from the beginning. I think we both liked each other from the very beginning. And I just said one day, hey, I'm just going to come and visit you to Poland. And she was like, really? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to visit you. Started my whole ordeal trying to get a visa to come to Poland, but I got it and came and visited her. And ever since 2012, we've been together, full on as a couple.
Okay, that's a pretty interesting backstory, because you met very briefly and there wasn't initially a romantic relationship, but just because you were in each other's virtual orbits online, then later on, when you were both single, you reconnected, you took the step of actually flying out to Poland, I guess, for the first time, and you even needed a visa, so you were obviously pretty motivated, and that's pretty sweet. I do tell guys in general that nowadays obviously things have developed in terms of different apps that we have, that it's pretty similar actually with Instagram, where you connect and you can watch each other's stories, and maybe down the road there's going to be some romantic connection, but in any case it's a good place to stay in contact. So even though you have an earlier version of what I've been describing, it's cool to see that was the way that you stayed on each other's radar for so long. So before you arrived, your feet hit the ground on the tarmac, presumably in Warsaw Airport and Chopin Airport. What did you know about Poland? What impression did you have about it? You never visited the country. You've met someone many years previously. Now it's clear you want to pursue a romantic relationship of some sorts with.
Yeah.
What were your preconceived notions of Poland and what it was going to be like?
Well, you see, just like I had almost no idea what Poland or Central Eastern Europe was like, outside of just your normal history lessons. But I come from the Dominican Republic. We are back, we're back there in the Caribbean. We do learn about, of course, world history, but we don't focus on Central European history. So my knowledge of Poland was rather slim. But what surprised me when I came was that, you see, Poland, like many Central Eastern European countries, because of communism and because of all the historical events that took place, have lived what is considered a relative, they are maybe not now, to some degree, yes, emerging economies, similar to Latin America, right? Or if you want to call it underdevelopment, if we want to be less politically correct. So in Latin America, many of the things that was part of my daily life somehow in Poland, I found a lot of them, just without the communism, because, for example, Cuba has a lot of association with communism. Dominican Republic doesn't. So in that regard, we were not, if I were to come from Cuba, I would tell you, oh, this, it fit right in. But it wasn't. We have a lot more of an American influence in the DR, in Dominican Republic. But still, many things were very familiar to me. So that's why from the very beginning, I felt really good in Poland. Really, really good. I could not explain to you why I did. And now I know, I came here in 2012. We ended up moving to Poland permanently in 2022. I, myself, like I said, moved here in 23 because I was working abroad, but my wife and my child came here in 22. So it was literally, what was that? It was 10 years later, right? Now I know that I set, without unknowingly at the time, I set the precedent for us to even open up the possibility to move to Poland. Because I said to my wife, the very first times that I came, I said, like, this is a great place. I could live here. And she was like, oh, really? Like, yeah, seriously. Fast forward 10 years later, here we are.
Okay, so that was already back in 2012. The obvious question is, because you felt this similarity being from the Dominican Republic in 2012, would you say it's the same today? Because Poland, as we all know, or most people know, has developed quite dramatically since then. It's been developing even previously since the 90s. Would you say that it has that similarity in 2026 with places like the Dominican Republic, or that was just a phase that was more relevant 15 years ago?
Well, that's an interesting question. What I will tell you is this. Poland is indeed not only changing, but it's a very rapid metamorphosis that is happening in Poland. It's undeniable. You have to be here to feel it. At the same time, Poland is still Poland. Polish people are still Polish people. Still, for example, here salaries are going to be lower than their counterpart in England or in Sweden or whatever. So it's like, yes, if you have the ability to envision into the future how can Poland be in 10 years? Then that's when you really can see the foundations. It's massively different than it was even 10 years ago. And I know that because I can see it through the eyes of my wife, who left 10 years ago. And now we're living here and she's like, wow, this has changed so much, even just compared to 10 years ago when I left. But still, you go to certain places and still a little bit of that post-communistic vibe where you are like, okay, customer service is a little bit lacking. Sometimes you go to a certain doctor's office or something and you can see the building it's still like it hasn't changed for 30 or 40 years. And I think that when people think, oh, Poland is changing, Poland is modernizing itself or whatever, yes, you come to Central Warsaw and you see the whole business center and everything, and you are like, wow, is this the same Poland than from 40 years ago? Completely different. But it's not yet a utopic, you say? You have dystopian reality and a utopian reality. It's not a utopian reality per se, Yeah. So it's important to keep it real also.
So you mentioned getting a visa for your first trip. You're a citizen of the Dominican Republic only, right? This was the passport you had to apply for a visa. Was that difficult back in 2012 as a Dominican citizen?
Yeah. Sadly, Dominicans, first of all, let me explain. We can go to many places without a visa. But the good places, the places that will get you, the interesting locations, when we need, right? Like we need a visa for any Schengen state. We need a visa to go to the UK. We need a visa. So in that sense, it is a little bit of an uphill battle. I'm not going to lie. It takes a while. You have to provide a lot of information. Conor, there is such a thing as passport privilege. Who's to blame for that? That's something else entirely. But it plays, I think, as a person that has been living abroad more than 20 years, I've lived in 5 different countries, 7 different cities. I can tell you that having a passport that is strong enough to get you places plays a big role in whatever success you will have, whether that's trying to buy a property abroad, trying to just go on holidays, or simply relocating. So yeah, it was a uphill struggle, not gonna lie. As a matter of fact, I will tell you a very funny story. Latinos, we have this duality when it comes to our reputation. On the one hand, we are well known for being happy, for being positive people. I think for the most part, Latinos around the world are welcomed, and that feels very good. At the same time, we do have a reputation, for example, for being, womanizers. We have a reputation for lying a little bit. Maybe not as much as other nationalities. You hear there, someone's like, no, from this country, don't ever. But if you hear a Latino and you're courting a lady from whatever country in a developed country, you will very often find at least one friend that will try to warn her. He's a Latino, be careful, So I was having a difficulty because by the time that I was trying to come to Poland to visit my wife, for the first time to visit her, I already had lived in Spain before, so I already had a visa, Schengen visa. I had also the NIE, which is the national identification document from Spain, but it was expired. I already had finished my studies and I was back in Dominican Republic living permanently. So I was trying to get visa and I thought it was going to be easier because, hey, come on, I lived 4 years in Spain. Maybe you guys can throw me a bone here. And they were still asking so many things. It was very difficult. And there was a moment that my wife thought that I was kind of like, I don't know, pulling her chain, or that I was trying to, she even said to me, are you even going to come, or are you just lying? And I'm like, I'm not. What are you talking about? I even sent her screenshots of the emails that I was sending the consulate, the Spanish consulate. And she's like, okay. And then later she admitted to me that it was a friend of hers that was in her ear telling her, probably he's not even going to come. Maybe he's even married and has a family over there. Can I tell you?
So that's the reputation of the Latin lover, that you're a bit of a ladies' man by default. So you can see how those stereotypes, they can complicate your connections at times. So you mentioned that you lived in a few different countries. Which were those? Yeah. Where were you living? You mentioned Spain. You're obviously from Dominican Republic. You've ended up in Poland. What were the countries in between before you moved?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I lived in Spain, both in Madrid and Barcelona. It's an interesting distinction because living in Barcelona, it's kind of like a whole thing entirely because of Catalonia and their Catalan and the whole thing. So it really feels like you're living in a separate country. That's what they want, actually. But I also lived in Austria, in Vienna. I also lived in South Africa, in Pretoria, and we lived in London. In all these places, I've lived a minimum of a couple of years. So it's not like I went there for 3 months and now I live there. It's like I actually lived there.
Very good. So you had even lived abroad in a few different places across the continent, across the globe. So it gives you a good perspective with respect to life in Poland. Being a Latino, with an international perspective, it's not like you came straight from the Dominican Republic without having lived, abroad beforehand. Like, what were the first culture shocks that you personally felt when you came to Poland? We'll say in the first time in 2012. I mean, you said that it felt very familiar in 2012 because of the shared emerging economy vibe. But what were the things that were like a little bit more of maybe difficult to adjust to or surprising?
Oh, to be fair, at that point, because I had already lived abroad and in Europe, it was easier for me to manage a lot of things. What I would say that became, and also I am not, it's very funny because I am as much a typical Latino as not a typical Latino, right? So I would like to believe that I'm not a noisy person. I would like to also believe that I have a good gauge to not overwhelm somebody with my energy, because sometimes that's the problem. Latinos have a lot of energy, and when you don't measure the input of energy that you are throwing onto somebody. If they come from places like here, I assume that Ukraine must be literally the same. People feel a little bit attacked. Like, hold on a second, why are you even so close to me, first of all? Or why are you touching me? We do that all the time. Talking to you and I go, hey man, I'm constantly doing this, you know what I mean? So I think that all those things help me to kind of like adapt. But I will say that probably time management was a complicated one, because we Latinos have a completely twisted view on time and management. But also, what I would like to what I would describe that initial contact with a Central Eastern European. I make sure that I distinguish that, because we're talking about Poland. I experienced relatively similar things in Austria, but it's not the same in Spain, right? It's like a different thing with Southern Europe. But people at the beginning are very like distant, and it takes a while for you to read and understand that they're not being unfriendly. Sometimes they are, but that they're not necessarily being unfriendly. That's just how they are. They don't laugh a lot. They put a little barrier until they feel comfortable. So back with my days when I was a single guy, and I was kind of like learning a little bit of how to communicate better. I remember there was this incredible theory that was fantastic. It was the 80-20 rule or something like that. I don't want to call it a rule, but that's kind of like how it was named. That you approach an 80%, and then the remaining 20%, you let the other person come to you, right? So that is pretty similar, I think, with Poles. And you get close so that they feel that you are friendly, but don't get too close and let them come to you.
Okay, yes, there's definitely a similarity here in Ukraine with Poland in that respect. People aren't, when they don't know you, they tend to have just a very expressionless face, I would say, compared to Latinos. I've never been to Dominican Republic, but I've been, huge number of times to countries like Brazil and Spain and other parts of Latin America. So yeah, there's just a completely different vibe with strangers, I would say. That people are very open, they're very informal straight away, whilst in Central Europe in general, people are a lot more reserved. They're not necessarily unfriendly, although they can also be very unfriendly depending where you are in your background. But point taken, that's a big cultural difference. Since you were a Latino, I guess, visitor to Poland in the beginning, and now you've immigrated to Poland, did you find any sort of like hostility from locals? I mean, there's kind of maybe the possibility they perceive you as stealing one of their women because you're a foreigner. Did you ever feel that in Poland from either people who were in your social circle or just strangers when they hear you? Maybe, I assume at the time you didn't speak Polish, so you were probably using English or Spanish as a way to communicate together, so you would have stood out in Poland.
Yeah, my experience was very different because I came to Poland already being married. So I was not out, clubbing, meeting girls. I've heard stories. I've heard stories, especially the last couple of years, that the world has gotten a little bit more center-right, if we want to call it that. People are a little bit more guarded of their culture, their values, but I'm a lucky person in that regard, because I have this YouTube channel where I speak about Poland and about Poles, and you get every so often your comment that is a little hateful, whatever. But I've never really felt threatened. I've never really felt that I'm walking and someone is looking at me like they want to beat me up. So I don't know. There's still time for that to happen. So,
hopefully we're not preempting
hopefully not.
something unfortunate happening to you after this interview. But it's good to hear that you didn't feel pretty much hostility. I think, you're already married. You're kind of, I guess, integrated a little bit more into Poland once you're married into it. Maybe that made it a bit easier than being the kind of typical weekend warrior who shows up as a single guy in Warsaw, hoping to impress the local lasses with your style and charisma and whatnot. So maybe that rubs people a little bit the wrong way more easily than if you're already married into the
Yeah.
society.
But I will tell you this: if I was, let's say I was a single guy coming to Poland, whatever. Let's say I'm interested in coming to Poland. There's this. You see, I don't think in 2026, maybe this was 10 years, 15 years ago, where people were hunting for Central Eastern European women. I think in 2026, we have a connected world through the internet. We have YouTubers. Listen, just 5 years ago, 6, when I started making videos on YouTube, there was almost nobody talking about Poland. Like literally almost nobody. There was one video I remember. I remember it because it had like 500,000 views, and I was, wow, that's a lot of views. And maybe there were some other local people, but there were like, there's a guy here that is a British guy that he lives here for like 30 years, 20 years. People like him already like part of the culture, but foreigners that were not living in Poland, talking about Poland, this was not a thing. And I believe that now, because we have all those videos, people are more aware. What are they going to find when they come? What are they going to, 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, people were more open to, oh, let me go and see. I want to meet a nice, beautiful Central European woman. But I think nowadays, people are a little bit more aware. What I think is this: if you're a single person and you listen, you can have a right to what you like, like some people like Latinas. So if you like a Latina, you're going to go to Latin America to try and meet them. So the same, if you like Central Eastern European women, you're going to come to these type of countries. What I really highly recommend is don't come here. First of all, don't come here fishing. Don't come here trying to show off anything. These people really hate. I'm talking about Poland. I've never been to Ukraine. I've never been to Belarus. You know what I mean? I'm talking about Poland. They really don't like the show-offy thing. Yes, there's a part of the population here in Poland. They're called Warszawka. It's like this Instagram model type, from very, very done up. Very, they have the watches and some of the guys have the cars and all that. But this is a part of the society. This is not majority. Majority of people are going to laugh in someone's face if they hear them trying to show off or whatever. But if you come, you have a drink, you see a person, you say something, you start a conversation, and you come off very down to earth, I think that they are very, very, as a matter of fact, I find them even more friendly and easier to, it's easier to penetrate than, for example, Latinas. Latinas are very well known for being extremely difficult to pick up, because they, you know what I mean? They are high maintenance, and I think it's all those things are adapted because of how the guys are. The guys being so forward, and so they are more like, no, hold on, you're not gonna penetrate here. I'm not gonna make it so easy for you. So yeah, keep that in mind. Whoever wants to come here with the intention of meeting a nice lady.
I would think that with my experience in Poland, that this kind of nouveau riche element of the culture that you're talking about, I think you're right that it's not so prevalent in Polish culture as here in Ukraine. I think here in Ukraine it's a lot more prevalent when you're talking about girls maybe having the duck lips and putting an extravagant amount of time onto their appearance. I think this is something that you see more here, or trying to show off a little bit more. I think that, that kind of maybe Dubai vibe a little bit. That's something that probably doesn't go down well in most of Polish society. I think that's definitely clear. I'm kind of surprised that you think that Latinas are so difficult. I would have thought that, having traveled around in Latin America and also in this region, that it would actually be the other way around, that people here are a little bit more reserved, especially in terms of sexual mores, where a lot of Latino culture is quite sexualized through music and in general. Would you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, but you see, that's where it gets complicated. I mean, do we have time to go into this? This is there are levels to this game, as they say. For example, if you want to meet somebody, just a cold approach. Yes, it's going to be more difficult in this part of the world because people are in general they have more of a barrier. Even their face, the so-called bitch resting face, that everyone has it. Women, men. So we should call it bitch resting face. At the same time, I don't know, the asshole resting face. And sometimes it's just that. It's just the look. They don't go around smiling for no reason. I cannot explain to you how many times somebody is honestly happy, but their face is just like this. So that's in that regard, Latinas are going to be easier, right, to start talking to, whatever. Now, another thing is, where are you from? Are you a gringo, as they call them in Latin America? Do you look like you are European?
So like me.
Then, yeah, exactly, like somebody like you. Then you have to really observe, who are you talking to? Are you talking to a person that has no interest in, let's say, has no interest in any some sort of benefit, like they don't want your money, they don't want you to invite them for nothing. If you meet that one from the get-go, it's going to be hard. I'm letting you know. Now, if you met the one that is going to be like, oh, okay, a nice little gringo, good looking, maybe I can get some drinks out of this or something, then in that case, it's going to feel to you that is drastically easier because they are more outgoing. You see? So it depends what is it that you are after. But I would say, if you're going to meet a lady that is centered, she's not looking for anything from you. She could be open for a nice chat, but like she's not looking for you to pay for nothing. She's not. And you put a Latina and you put a Eastern European, and they say that both of them like you. Okay, both of them like you. Let's say they looked at you and say, "Oh, that's a nice looking gentleman. He seems interesting." The Latina will be a little bit more. She will play a little bit more games. Let's say. The Central Eastern European, or the Polish one, I guess, let's say, is going to be friendly. It's going to talk to you or whatever, but there's no game involved, which leads to what you said. Let's say whether the encounter will lead onto something physical faster or not. The European, in her mind, because a lot of things in Europe, there's a lot of less preconceived notions, a lot of less problems with admitting that, hey, if I want to sleep with somebody, I sleep with somebody. In Latin America, there's a lot of things around that. You cannot let anyone know that you are so easy, etc. So here, people make their decisions. They move also earlier out of their parents' house, so they don't have to think what their parents are going to think, what la la la. So that's why sometimes it feels that they might be easier. They're not. If they went to bed with you, it's because they made the decision. That was not because you're so good at it. That, oh, I'm so great, I have such game that she didn't even realize and she was already in my sheets. No, you can almost be sure that she decided that.
Okay. How much do you think those socioeconomics might be playing into that? Because you mentioned, like someone like me who's from Western Europe, so certain socioeconomic status, is that playing in a lot more in Latin America nowadays versus Poland? Because Poland has developed so much, so there isn't that gap like there would have been. I think that's when we talk about passport bros, for example, I tell them don't go anywhere near Poland. Don't waste your time because, it's not going to be super cheap and easy.
Yep, 100%. You nailed it. It has a fairly simple explanation. The harder it is for you to survive on a daily basis, the more you're willing to do, right? That's why crime rates are higher in countries where there's poverty. That's why prostitution and so on, because people are in need. And in Poland, for example, we're not living in Poland back in the 70s or 60s. We're living in Poland 2026. Even with salaries being lower, let's say, than the UK, still people here live a really good life. Like there's a lot of consumption of internal products. They really support their own brands or whatever, and because of that, many of them can do so much, even with their relative reduced salaries. Again, I just say reduced salaries when you compare them to Scandinavia and so on. But yeah, you're not gonna impress a Polish lady because you are wearing a Rolex. Depending where you're from, depending where are you might even be looked down upon. So it depends.
So pivoting or segueing from our discussion there a little bit about socioeconomics, how do you see the cost of living in 2026 in Warsaw, in Poland, or maybe Poland in general, compared to 10 years ago and compared to other parts of Europe? Because you mentioned that you'd also lived in Spain, you lived in the UK. Just living expenses, obviously you're a family man, you have a family, and maybe real estate, because you're probably, that's something that's obviously important to you once you've settled down to a certain extent. Do you think it's a cheap place? Do you think it's an expensive place? Where would you position Poland in 2026?
So that is an interesting one. We have seen the cost of living increase tremendously here, especially when we compare it to, let's say, 10 years ago when we were coming to Poland just visiting. We were at the time, let's say, living in Vienna, in Austria. That's where my wife and I, we got married and we started living in Austria. That's what we did for 4 years. And we would compare, oh wow, and this is so much cheaper in Poland. Even though Vienna was not necessarily mega expensive, right? Like maybe London was. And still, we would see a difference. But nowadays, things are significantly more expensive. Real estate, rent, it's complicated, and a lot of it, of course, got worse because of the Russian war in Ukraine, and the exodus, and the amount of immigration that came. Of course, now all of a sudden you have a lot of people needing housing, and sometimes landlords do what landlords do, which is you have a lot of demand, so now I'm going to sit like a king or a queen, and I'm going to up the prices. Many other things, right? But I still think, and this is my really honestly humble opinion, I still think that if you plan yourself well, what does that mean? If you are not a person that you owe everything, you have a loan for everything, you have a car that is a loan, you have a mortgage, you have everything that you have, even your phone is you're paying it monthly, then in that case, you're going to be suffocated rather quickly. But if you can manage to live a life where you don't need to upgrade your phone every year or every 2 years. And I say the phone because it sounds ridiculous, but a phone these days is 1,000 plus euro, right? If you don't need to change your car every 2 or 3 years, even if you can go to 5 or 6, and you prioritize certain things, I still believe that you can live a fantastic life in Poland.
So what would be really, I think, enlightening as a comparison would be with, say, the cost of living for a similar lifestyle in the UK where you lived before, maybe with Spain, because a lot of my audience is also kind of interested in Spain. Even though it's not in the same region, they like to do these comparisons. And maybe with the US, I mean, is it going to be 10% cheaper for the same standard of life, 20% cheaper, 30% cheaper? Here in Odessa, because we have this war and obviously we don't have so much international tourism, if you wanted to visit and stay in a hotel, it's going to be very expensive in peak season because there are Ukrainians coming, but like in the middle of winter, one of my clients was like in a nice hotel in the center and he was paying less than $20 a night. Can you imagine, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
When I have personally my flat white index because I drink flat white coffee a few times a day, so it's easy for me to compare. Yep. And I pay nowadays, we've had a little bit of inflation here, it's €2.10. But when I'm in Warsaw, for example, I pay standard €4.20, and at times I paid almost €5 in Warsaw. Yep. To give you a comparison with Western Europe, I'm from Galway originally on the west coast of Ireland. When I was back there in 2022, after I left for a couple of months, left Ukraine with the invasion, my local cafe, which in all fairness to it is listed in the top 50 or top 100 or something in the world as a cafe, so it's a very good one, but it was €4.50 at the time. So you can see that here in Ukraine, you could say it's like you get the same value. We're talking about top level coffee. It's something you can compare across borders. Yep. And it's about half the price. Even to Warsaw, it's getting pretty much around that price point. Yep. So it looks to me that maybe a 20% difference, a 30%, maybe it's going to be a bit different for real estate. Maybe it's going to be a bit more or less. How would you describe like the value for money that you get in Poland versus being further west?
Well, the first thing is I cannot compare it to Spain. I was in Spain a long time ago, so I really would not be able to, like, even on holidays. Last time was before my son was born and he's going to be 8. So let's leave Spain out of the way. I don't think it will be also fair Austria because I haven't been in Austria since 2016. So I think anywhere that you're going to talk about when it comes to finances, if you've never been there after the pandemic, we should exclude that person's opinion on that place. But London is a great way to measure it. So just so you understand, if I wanted to, I own a home here that I bought. If I were to buy this same house in the UK, right now, I would have to probably get a mortgage to cover more than 1 or 1.5 million pounds. And I'm not saying that this house is huge. This is a good size. It's a good sized house, you know. But it's not a flat, right? All I'm saying is not a flat with a couple of rooms. This is a house, 3-bedroom, whatever. Because that's how difficult it is. Property in the UK, rent the same. When we were there, we were trying to work around because originally we ended up being here because post-pandemic, in a post-pandemic world, it became harder and harder to be in London. As much as we loved it, I still love it. You have no idea, but I could not get family to fly easily. All of a sudden, flights were like double or triple the price. So for my job, I got a transfer to South Africa. That's how I ended up living there a couple of years by myself. But so we decided, okay, let's come to Poland. We did a quick calculation, especially owning a place. For us, it was important. Not the same for everybody. I have a great friend. He's American, married to a Polish lady. And for example, in his case, he says, listen, I understand in Poland because they don't have a fixed rate when it comes to mortgages. So it's going to be variable. In the US, I have a mortgage that is fixed. So for me, I make more money getting a mortgage, buying the house, and whatever I have, investing it in the S&P 500, whatever, than I do by just putting all that cash in a house. Whereas here, it's more complicated, you know? But what I would say is that it's at least, I feel it's at least like a 20, 25, could be even close to 30% difference. And it's not like Warsaw is particularly cheap these days, like you mentioned it.
Exactly, because I've researched it, and I was actually a bit surprised about what you would have to spend to get on the property ladder in Warsaw nowadays. So you think it's maybe about, you said 20 or 30% cheaper? Like you bought a house, you said in the UK to be maybe around 1.5 million. So does that mean it's like still even $1 million in Warsaw? Or like what's the comparison so people have a better ballpark without?
Well, for I don't know, like a place, for example. Again, you know, I don't live in central Warsaw. I live in Warsaw, but it's on the outskirts of Warsaw. Granted, I live next to a little town that is very well known here. As a matter of fact, I think the most amount of millionaires in Poland live in this little town where I am. Not necessarily that I'm not a rich person. We just found a great deal at a right time. But what I'm explaining is that on the one hand, we live in a very good area, but the properties are not the same when it comes to buying a property in central Warsaw. Still, it's higher price there. You know that's what I'm saying. But here, a house like this, similar-ish in that ballpark, you're looking at 300,000-400,000 pounds. You know, 500,000 pounds tops. In the UK, you know, I used to live in Chiswick. And I remember a 3-bedroom house, it was 1.5 million, you know?
Okay, so somewhere between 1 to 1.5 million, so it's at least half.
Yeah.
That's kind of your ballpark feeling about the difference in the price. That's still substantial, clearly.
Yeah, it is.
And I think that's something for guys to consider if they're able to manage their revenues remotely, in particular, that they can still, even though the price of property has gone up a lot in Warsaw, it's still going to be easier to get on that property ladder. Being born in Ireland, it's like a perennial crisis always about housing because the government hasn't allowed so much to be built in the last 10 years since we had this 2008 financial crisis. So the price of property is quite high compared to people's ability to finance it nowadays and get on that property ladder. So Poland can be an option. Of course, you would get paid commensurate less probably if you moved to Poland and took a commensurate job. And I think you referenced that for Poles, of course, their salaries are lower than they're going to be in Sweden or the UK, but the cost of living and in particular buying real estate is also lower. So you might end up with the same standard of living, maybe even better if you were to move to Poland. And in particular, if you're able to manage the same revenues remotely, then it's kind of a bit of a no-brainer. In terms of integration, because you didn't speak Polish, at least in the beginning, when you came to Poland, how has that been as a journey I know you've been learning Polish. How hard is it as a language to learn? Is it really necessary? I mean, I always get this pushback because I love languages. I speak lots of them, and I don't expect everybody to share my passion, for example, for learning languages. And it's just something that I've always been into since I was in my 20s. And I do speak a little bit of Polish. I'm not particularly strong at it, but I'm getting better and better. Do you really need Polish if you were to move to Poland? What is it like when you first arrive? If you don't speak it, how accommodating are people? And how long did it take you to get up to a decent level where you felt, okay, I can do most things in Polish, for example?
Well, first of all, to just round up the previous point, we are, I don't know you, but I'm not a financial advisor. So whatever I'm going to say, you guys do your research properly, right? Like, so that they understand. Maybe they're thinking, oh, he told me that I can buy a house.
I think that goes without saying.
Yeah, but we're public people, right? We are here with YouTube channels and all that. When they say I came to Poland to buy a property, he said $500,000. All of a sudden, it's $1 million. I don't know. I'm just going. Also, I bought this place in 2021-ish, 2022. So a lot has changed also ever since that moment. But
it may be a good bit higher in the meantime.
It is.
Because obviously with the 2022 Russian invasion here, a lot of Ukrainians went and they need to live somewhere. So I think that's put a lot of upward pressure on the property market, both for rent and for buying.
Massive difference.
Okay, we've added in that little disclaimer. So we'll pivot to the language, which is still the same as pre-2022.
Listen, to the language, first of all, I completely agree with you, and a massive respect to you, because I think a lot of your success has been precisely the fact that you have taken it seriously when it comes to learning enough of the local language to integrate. Imagine that somebody's going to move to the UK, right? You're from the UK or you're from Ireland? Remind me once again.
I'm from Galway in Ireland originally.
From Ireland, right? Ireland is not in the UK, I am almost sure. So you are from Ireland.
Well, the Northern Ireland is in the UK, but I'm from the south, so I'm from the Republic.
You're from Ireland. Yeah, I have to get that right.
That's in
Don't ever make the mistake. Don't say Ireland and UK. But So no, but for example, imagine someone comes to Ireland and then all of a sudden they say, "Yeah, do I really need English? They're nice people. We can speak sign language." It's like, yeah, we're nice people, but after a while, not only you are going to get more done, but hey, you're going to get the respect of the locals because you're trying. And I think in the Polish people, for example, I don't know how it's in Ukraine, they understand that their language is hard. They are aware that their language is hard. So they respect people that are trying. I do think it's needed. Now, do you come as a person that wants to invest, wants to move, want to change your life? Do you need to take 3 years of Polish before you come? No, obviously. There's a lot of people speak English. There are a lot of firms that will deal with you in English. But you have to be aware that, first of all, it's going to be a lot more headaches. It's going to be more expensive. And the Polish system is very well known for being cumbersome and for being just convoluted. There's still a remnant of communism. Things are just bureaucratic, and even going to the post office, sometimes I'm going to send a package and there are so many spots and thinking, why do I need to give all that information? I lived in London for almost 6 years and it's so easy. I think in the UK where we can almost send a package from your house. You know what I mean? Just you scan the package and it appears somewhere else anyways. But that's how easy it is. Here, there's a lot of that process that is complicated. So I would say, if you come as a foreigner, one of the first things that someone should do, like before you go out to a club, get yourself enrolled in some lessons. Whether it's private, I have a private teacher for the last 2 years, but some people have a school, they go to a school, or some others have online classes, but with a group. And the reason for this is, and maybe you can back me up on this because you speak a couple of Slavic languages, right? Like I think you speak Russian, and those are not languages that.
Yeah, I speak pretty good Russian. I speak okay Ukrainian, getting better. It's become obviously a lot more important in the last few years. Mm-hmm. I also speak Belarusian to an intermediate level, which is unfortunately not been as useful in application as I had envisioned when I first started learning. It's a little bit of an oddity. I speak some basic Polish. I'm not very strong in Polish yet, but yeah. So you could say I speak well in three, and I dabble in the fourth in terms of Slavic.
Yeah, well, so you can back me up when I say that these languages, they just don't click all of a sudden. It doesn't work like that. They have a completely different structure and logic to them if you don't come from a Slavic-based language. That's why Ukrainians come here, and in a year they're speaking Polish to a level that I am so envious. And I'm like, wow, I wish, they come here with zero Polish, and in a year they're just speaking, they're working everywhere, whatever. But it's because their languages are similar-ish. If not similar in vocabulary, for example, they're similar in structure. They're similar in the amount of cases that they use. They're similar in, many things. So for us, Spanish speakers, English speakers, name it. Like Germans would have it a little easier because they have 4 cases, whereas Polish has 7, for example. So in that regard, there's also a little bit more similarities. But German is also kind of like associated more to English in that, if you go to the root of the language, I believe. But yeah, start Polish or whatever language from whichever country you're going to go in Central Eastern Europe makes a big difference.
Even though Poles have quite a good standard of English, I would say overall, it's not like Sweden or being in the Netherlands where they almost speak as good English as I do, even though they're not native speakers technically. You would still say that it is worth, as soon as you arrive and you have some perspective in Poland, to actually go and start learning Polish rather than falling into a foreigner bubble and just using English. You would recommend, yeah?
Yeah. Because you have to think of this. For example, in Scandinavia, for instance, even let's say the boomer generation, anyone living in, been born in the 50s, 60s, they were already having English as a second language in school. Whereas here, it used to be Russian. So a lot of young people in Poland, and I want to say young people, anyone like 40 under, they will have had English as a second language, but their parents don't speak English, for example. So that plays a role, right? How? Well, for instance, if your parents don't speak English, and there's a movie being played when you are 7 years old, if your parents don't know English, they're going to switch to the lector, or they're going to go to whatever language. Let's not watch this because I don't understand. So you, as a child, are not exposed to that language. Whereas if I understand a little bit of English, hey, okay, let's leave the movie to play, and my kid is going to start listening to that. That's why Scandinavians have so good English, and also Germans, they have, because they've been with this language for a far longer than Polish people. A lot of the young Poles, anyone 30 under, it's astounding. Their English is just up here. But as part of their culture and how they are as people, they have like what they call a national low self-esteem problem in that sense when it comes to their language, where they speak really good English, they understand, but they're not going to come and tell you, yeah, let's speak English, I know English. They're going to be more like, hold on, let me see, so that gives the impression that they know less than they do.
Okay. Yeah, in Poland, definitely there's a little bit of national pride as well with the language, I think, because of Poland's history. It was obviously not a country for a while. Is it maybe a little bit similar here in Ukraine? Ukraine was also for a lot longer off the map than Poland was. And you mentioned there about children and learning languages. Are your own kids going to grow up bilingual, trilingual? How are you educating them? What's the plan there? Because you speak Spanish as your first language, your wife speaks Polish, and maybe you also you speak fluent English and you use it a lot, obviously professionally. How do you envision the linguistic setup for your children?
I speak Spanish to my children exclusively because my wife is a linguist. So when we had our first kid, I turned to her and asked her, what do we do? How does this work? Because me and her speak English. Or at the time, we spoke English 90% of the time. She speaks almost perfect Spanish also, but at the time that we met, her Spanish was not there to that level yet. So their relationship established itself in English, which if you've been with anyone from another culture and another language, you know that how their relationship starts kind of like solidifies a little bit the language that you guys are going to feel more comfortable speaking, even if over time you incorporate others. So we speak mostly English, my wife and I, and I was asking her, what do we do? And she said, well, the studies show that each parent speaks to their child in their native tongue. So you are Dominican, you speak Spanish, don't use any other language to any of my kids, and same with her. Remember, at the time we were living in the UK, my son was born in London. So at home he was listening to mom in Polish, dad in Spanish, then we together were speaking English, and in school or preschool, whatever, he was speaking English. So it was just like a paella of just things. It was actually very funny. And now it's even worse because now I speak more Polish. So I use words and sentences sometimes, and my wife sometimes says things in Spanish too. So it's very common for us to be sitting at a table, literally, and it will be like this. I'm saying something to my wife, da, 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 and then I turn to my son and I say it in Spanish. Then he answers me, but then he says something, oh, mom, did you know that dad just said this? And then he says it to her in Polish. So it's like there's a switch that happens just immediately.
Okay, yeah, so it's kind of a Tower of Babel to a certain extent at home, if you know the metaphor.
Yeah.
And like, how do you deal with traditions in the family? Do you celebrate all the Dominican festivals as well as the Polish? Because obviously you're not living in the Dominican Republic. How does that work out?
Well, I mean, we share similar holidays because they are both Catholic countries, Christian countries. I am not religious, nor is my wife, so we don't follow that in that sense. But the way that we incorporate things is, for example, let's say up until this year, this is the first year that we actually decided to change this. My son would celebrate Mother's Day, which Polish Mother's Day, for example. And then when it came to Father's Day, he would celebrate, let's say, congratulate me or whatever on the Dominican Father's Day, which is a completely different day than the Polish one. This year we decided to change. Last year I said to my wife, listen, we live in Poland. Yes, I'm a Dominican dad, but let's make our children's life easier. When they go to school, they prepare events for Father's Day or something. I don't want him to feel excluded because, my dad is Dominican and his Father's Day is in another date. So I said, from now on, we're going to celebrate Father's Day like in Poland, But for many years we did that. Christmas, we do a mix of dishes. Half of them are Polish oriented, half of them are Dominican oriented. So my son, for example, in Dominican Republic, we celebrate the Three Kings, the 6th of January. That's when kids usually get gifts instead of Santa or Mikołaj. So my son gets his gifts in Christmas, normal Polish day, but then he gets like an extra gift from my mom, his Dominican grandma, on the Three Kings. So that's kind of like we keep it a little mixed.
Well, that's great for the kids. They get all the festivals,
Yeah.
not just Polish or Dominican. They can mix everything and take kind of advantage. It's interesting when you're talking about the language, especially because on this channel I've documented, I was being in a relationship using Russian in the beginning because I didn't speak Ukrainian back in the day with Angela. And then because also of the changes here on the ground, now Odessa is basically on a daily basis bilingual here with this change kind of towards Ukrainian, but it's still a little bit maybe odd to switch up the language once it's become solidified with the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that's something that is interesting as you end up in a long-term relationship and you learn your partner's language, that sometimes they still want to speak in the third language. It's neither of a first language, but it's the language in which that we've started the relationship, right?
Yep.
So it kind of is, has important, I think, emotional value. That's interesting to hear that it was something similar for you as well. Who do you think Poland is really for in 2026? Because we're both aware of the huge hype that's been around Poland that seems to be dissipating a little bit in the last year, but definitely we'll say in the last 5 years it's been so hyped up. Not for everybody, definitely people with different political persuasions try to present Poland as being something that, in my experience, doesn't quite match with the reality. who do you think should be looking at spending time? We don't really mean for tourism. Everybody should come for tourism and experience things. I think that's pretty clear, right? But for maybe spending a lot of time, doesn't mean they have to relocate for the whole year, but maybe they're going to come and spend at least 3 months a year in Poland. It can be part of their plan. They don't even necessarily maybe have to get a visa. Maybe they have visa free that allows them to stay half the year. So who would you think it's a good idea for? What kind of profile in 2026?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Listen, I will tell you this. I think Poland is a fantastic country when you have some sort of ties to the country. If you have a partner, if you have, let's say, your grandmother or great-grandmother was Polish and you want to reconnect with your roots. Obviously, I don't want to talk about investors. If you're investing and buying real estate, whatever, that's something different, right? Like you're asking me about a person that maybe wants to come spend some months in the country and absorb the culture. So I would
more lifestyle.
Yeah, I would say that in 2026, Poland is still not the country that is going to be extremely welcoming to all the foreigners to come and create a little micro bubble. Like when you go to Spain, when you go to Portugal, you have a little bit like of this like little bubble of foreigners that come and they hang out and they do what all things all foreigners do, right? They buy their little villas or whatever, go to the beach. But that's not the life of the locals. They incorporate a little bit of the life of the locals, right? But there are enough foreigners living there to create a little micro bubble. Poland is very jealous of that. Poland doesn't want that. Poland does not want micro bubbles of nothing. Poland wants you to, if you're going to come, you have to become part of who we are. So they want you to speak the language, or at least try. They want you to respect their norms. They don't want you to, because I'm a Latino, so I love playing loud music. Dude, you're going to hear your neighbors knock on your door, and they're not going to call the police. Literally, some big-ass dude is going to come and knock your door and tell you, if you don't turn that off, I'm going to turn it off for you, right? Like, this is no suing here. Because they understand that, hey, respect our rules, and then we're going to be fine. And I think that that's important. Now, if you have some sort of connection to the country through a romantic relationship or something, then all of a sudden you start appreciating other things of the culture. And then you start, that's when I believe that Poland really opens up. It's not for a person that is going to come, like I said, for a month or two and just, because think about it, like summer is really, really nice in Poland, but it's a couple of months of the year. And still, right, the prices are going high. Like we don't really have here like a nice warm beach. So it's not that type of country. It's another type of country. It's a country where you're going to absorb the culture in other ways. So yeah, that's what I would say. 2026 is still a complicated place to be, depending what you want from the country.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with my experience advising clients to a certain extent. I did have one particular client who was absolutely adamant that we needed to hang out together in Warsaw, that Poland was, he told me he loves Poland. And I was a little bit skeptical about that love for Poland, so to speak, because he had previously lived in Poland, didn't learn any Polish. I mean, he had lived in Poland for a year, like back, I think he said 2012 in Wrocław, when he still had a lot of that foreigner factor, shall we say, which I don't think exists at all. People are, they met everybody from everywhere at this stage in Poland. Poles have traveled, they have a great passport, the socioeconomic level has developed so much. And yeah, he was very, very disappointed with his experience in Warsaw because what he imagined, not really wanting to integrate. And I argued with him, so I don't believe you actually want to be here in Poland. I think you're a little bit in denial. And he argued me for a while, and then eventually, I guess, he accepted it.
Yeah.
And actually now he's told me he's moved to Berlin, and he's saying, oh, I can just speak English here. And, he's a little bit, I feel, bitter towards Poland because he had this previous experience, and he thought he could relive it in 2023 at the time. And that's, life has moved on. It's over a decade, and Poland is quite a different society, and it's not an international city in the sense of New York, London, where you can, or maybe even Barcelona is the same to a certain extent, I'm not so sure. But definitely Berlin, it seems, where you can just, use English, hang out with other foreigners,
Yeah.
and go about your daily life and not integrate whatsoever.
Yeah.
Poland seems still to be a country where a certain amount of integration is definitely going to be necessary for most people to have a fulfilling time in the country. So that's quite interesting that what you're echoing a lot of what I've seen with advising guys in general. I think maybe just to wrap it up, because we will meet each other again, I'm pretty sure, in film follow-ups in the future when I'm back in Warsaw. What do you think are the biggest things that have been misrepresented about Poland in like international media? And we can throw YouTube into that, because nowadays this is also media to a certain extent.
For example, that Poland is a poor country, poor Eastern European country. There's nothing to see there, nothing to do. And at the same time, Poland is so rich and so powerful and so, is basically the new leader of the free world. Both of those are incorrect. I think that you can have an experience here where you are at the top of the chain, and it's like, Jesus, I really am like I am in London 25 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, you can feel like that. But at the same time, you also can go to places where you feel that you are somewhere in Bulgaria, you know what I mean, in some back road in Bulgaria. So all those things, and by the way, there's no disrespect to Bulgaria. I'm just saying that, just using the stereotype of the Eastern European country that supposedly is not yet so advanced, that the world has recognized it. Okay, so it's nothing against Bulgaria. I could have used any other country.
You can pick on the back roads of Ukraine, because I can tell you from personal experience they're pretty bad when you get out to the country.
For example,
in some parts of rural Ukraine.
Yeah, same here. Again, you go to some places here that you are like, wow, and the people look rough. And you are like, okay. So I think that's the misrepresentation that Poland has, and all these YouTubers, and myself included, because I don't like to be a hypocrite. I started making videos about Poland before all this trend happened, and I did it because I believe that I did it for the right reasons, which is I really was interested in the culture because of my kid. My son was the thing that ignited that interest, because I'm thinking, man, that's my kid, and he's half Polish, like. And at the time, we were not even thinking about moving to Poland, but I want to understand his culture more. I want to understand my wife's culture more, so I started making videos. And of course, YouTube remunerated me because of pandemic. People were all at home watching, so I got views. And I'm like, okay, it motivates you to dig even deeper into making videos. And so I don't want to now say that everyone making videos about Poland, they're fake and they're doing it only because of the views. I've also benefited from views and from polls. Wanting to see my Polish content. But I do think that this big bubble that you said, that now seems to be slowly deflating slightly, is because people notice, okay, you speak about Poland, you got a bunch of Polish people that are going to come to watch your videos, and it explodes. But that's part of the dichotomy of Poland. Poland is a country of contrast. I always say it's a country of contrast. Part of the contrast is that they are going to shower you with love, and they're going to give you their time. They're going to watch your video. Believe me, I see some YouTubers getting hundreds of thousands of views on each of their videos. But very quickly, they go like this and they switch and they say, oh, I see. Now, you're not really interested in this. You're just riding this bubble. And they turn on you, brother, like you are their worst enemy. So, and that's part of the contrast of Poland. That's why I told you that here you can have an experience like a first world country, the best of them all, and then you can also have the back roads of of the communistic era.
So it's still a country of many contrasts. I know that you have a second channel, not just the main channel, Vigo's Dad, nowadays, where you vlog your travels around Poland as well, which is super interesting. I know you've been developing out the content for that. Remind me what the name of the second channel is, because I watch it, I subscribe to it, but I've forgotten the name.
Thank you so much. Thank you for even bringing it up, to be honest. It's called Jestem JT. Jestem is a Polish word for I am. I'm JT. Jestem JT. And it's
that's right.
precisely that. My main channel, Vigo's Dad, is a channel about cultural observations. A lot of it is Polish-based, because I live in Poland, and that's has been kind of like the focus of it. But it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more thought out, a little bit more research and topics where I'm questioning things, questioning Polish psychology or different things. I compare my life experiences. But the travel channel is just like you said, it's a travel channel, but exclusively traveling inside Poland. Like on this channel, for the time being, I'm not going to go and record an episode in Odessa. I would love to go and visit you to Odessa though, but I will not be making a video about that or about Bali or about Phuket. It's about Poland. So I am going through all the cities. My goal is to eventually see the whole country. I don't think I can see all the villages, of course, but I want to cover all the main bigger cities. You know, you have the Gdańsk, Gdynia, Sopot, Kraków, Wrocław, all those big ones. But then there are like the middle-sized ones, the ones that are not well known internationally, but Poles know them very well. You have, 250,000 people living there. So I want to go and visit them all, because I really think that that's the final step that I have to understanding Poland, or at least maybe not the final step, because I don't think I will ever fully understand it, but like the final door that I need to open so that I can unlock the next world. You know what I mean? Like when you play Mario and you go like, you think it's done, but then you enter the castle and you go down this little elevator down and there's a whole underworld. So, yeah.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with me, because during the pandemic, in particular between 2020 and 2022, here on my channel, I was documenting just about every corner of Ukraine. I made so many vlogs in different cities, and it really helped me to understand this country thoroughly.
Yeah.
Not just hanging out and partying in Kyiv and Lviv and Odessa all the time. I actually really went everywhere, even to a lot of the remote areas, and documented them. I was almost there. If the invasion hadn't happened, I think the next summer, 2022, without a war here or the war touching the rest of the country, I could have documented all of unoccupied Ukraine at the time. Obviously, I couldn't go to Crimea or the occupied parts of Luhansk and Donetsk at the time, but definitely I found it very rewarding. It's interesting that you decided to put it on a separate channel. Well, it's probably too late for me to start doing that since I already made all the content. It's all on this one, but that has been really helpful, I think, for the audience today. JT, Gautreau, it was really a pleasure to have you and have you make your debut on the New Europe experience here with me, with Conor Clyne. So everybody, if you're interested in Poland and you want to get a foreigner's view who actually is married into the culture quite literally and has a family, and give you a really broad perspective, traveled around and pretty well balanced in his coverage, in my opinion, with my experience and what I've seen on the channel, then definitely go and check out both Vigo's dad and Jestem JT.
Thank you. Listen,
Amigo, I can't wait. I can't wait to get back to Warsaw sometime too, and we can go out and have a drink together, a cerveza, a pivo together, and catch up in real time. Thanks for coming on today, and yeah, hope all is going well in Warsaw, and we catch up in the near future.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you to your audience, of course, for their time. I appreciate the invitation. When you come here, we're gonna hang out. Maybe we can record a video for my channel, and have you introduce you to my audience. And to be honest, I really, really look forward. I don't know how's the situation. I have to talk to you a little bit more about it privately. But I would love to go to Ukraine. I would like to go and see, because Ukraine to me these days is similar to what Poland was before. Like I didn't have enough information, just what you see online. And you and I, like, we're on the regular exchange conversations on Instagram, and you are like, yeah, man, I'm just here having a coffee in Odessa and all this. And I'm like, he seems to be living like a normal life to some degree, as much as normal as it can be when you have attack notifications from time to time. But I don't know, it seems like there's still, the culture in Ukraine is very solid, still is very, people are really, really, really proud of their country. So I'm really looking forward to visiting you over there.
Welcome, man. We'll set it up at some stage. Łaskawo prosimy do Ukrainy. So you're welcome to Ukraine anytime when you can fit it in. I think you're right. For me, it feels like not just that Ukraine is what Poland maybe was culturally. They were very similar. They have, a lot of things historically overlapping. But I also feel that after this war, that Ukraine will become the new Poland, and Poland really is an example for Ukraine to follow. So with all things going well, we'll be celebrating that not just in the near future, but hopefully in the next decade or so. All right, I think we'll wrap it up then. Adios,
Do widzenia.
and see you soon, man.
Cheers.
Do widzenia.